I'm Sandy Roberts, and welcome to Sandy Roberts Presents, a tough and exciting look at that wacky old world of sport. And tonight's show is the first of what I hope will be the first of many more to come. Tonight, Sandy Roberts presents a story that was deemed too hot for network television. A story that will lift the lid on football's very own Wordsmith, the legendary Vincenzo Defanti, or Jimmy to his mates. You won't find his name in any record books. He's never kicked a footy. He's never coached a team. But as you're about to discover, this man's shadow hangs deeper and darker than any other shadow in the history of Australian rules football history. But before we begin, when I made the move from network TV to my new home here at Fox Footy, everybody asked me, why Sandy? What gives? And my answer? Fox Footy. They've given me a chance to pursue the tough stories, to get away from the politics, the pressure and, let's face it, the egos of network TV. That's why this show, created exclusively by and for yours truly, has given me the chance to realise a dream. I have a dream, the fellow once said, and this dream is mine. So let's crack into it. I'm Sandy Roberts, and this is Sandy Roberts Presents.
There's a pig at full forward. The games of the 22nd Olympiad, for many reasons, are quite unique.
That's a great shot. Great. Okay. Thank you. I'm Sandy Roberts. I first heard the name Jimmy Defanti when I was just a young reporter, starting out at BCV8 TV in Bendigo. It was an unusual name, whispered in football circles as more of a myth than a man. But I never followed it up because I didn't know who he was, and I had no idea what they were talking about. It was only years later, when I was having a beer with my great mate, coaching legend John Kennedy Sr., that he made a startling confession. Not only did he know the mysterious Jimmy Defanti, Defanti was the author of his most famous speech, the 1975 Grand Final rev-up, the Don't Think, Do speech. That's right, Defanti, whoever he was, is the author of this famous piece of football history.
And even the Governor, Sir Henry Winnicky, he has often said, at least do something! Do! Don't think, Mick! Don't hope! Do! At least you can come off and say, I did this! Or I shepherded it! Or I played on! At least I did something for the sake of the side. Do! Act! Don't think, act!
If this had been made public, the whole fabric of our game would have been destroyed. And I tell you what, the faith of the public would have been destroyed as well with it. And they would have been screaming, I tell you.
After 40 years, I think it's time that Jimmy's place in the game, the influence that he had, and the history that was written on the back of this man should finally be acknowledged.
Look, we've all kept this under the radar for a long, long time.
Brass, passionate and fiery. Jimmy controlled.
I wouldn't have even known Kennedy or Jeansy or, Tommy always did mention to me a couple of times that this guy is the best by a mile.
Jimmy controlled everything. What the coaches wore, what they said, how they said it. Yet 99% of the football world has never heard of him. That's his genius.
It was a typical day in the life of a journo, and my old mate John Kennedy had some secrets to reveal. So what, this is it here, John, is it?
I said, yeah, this is Jimmy's memorabilia.
It was a treasure trove of memorabilia, secret sound recordings, lost film footage, and priceless memorabilia. You never knew you had this in your garage? Sorry, Dulcie. That's right, so you're giving it to me?
That's right, yes, I'm giving it to you.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
And the secret sound recordings were labelled with some very familiar faces. Ron Barassi's speech. And who knew what else we would find in John Kennedy's garage? There'll be a John Kennedy in here. Beautiful. All right, John. Thank you very much for that. My old mate's secrets were safe at last. Now, I'm no expert when it comes to film footage or old-fashioned Dick DeBelt voice recordings, I might be old, but I'm no John Kennedy. I'm just a reporter, pure and simple. Old-fashioned, some might say. But I needed the facts, so I decided to pay a visit to my old mate Cole Hutchinson, the official historian of the AFL. What, if anything, did John's treasure trove have to reveal?
What we're doing here is lining up the original 16mm voice recording of John Kennedy's famous 1975 speech alongside the very fragile dictabelt tape that John gave to me in complete and total confidence. Now, for those of you who don't know, dictabelt, or memo belt as it used to be known, were sound recordings made back in the day on a very cheap vinyl strip, using punch marks on the strip, much like Braille is used on paper for our blind viewers, if you're watching, who'd know about such things. This stuff is delicate.
Cole, what have we got?
Well, John Kennedy's collection is undoubtedly the most significant find that I've ever been involved with. Proof that the great speeches of the 1960s and 70s were written by the one person, an elusive character named Jimmy Defanti.
As the wise man once said, sometimes you have to see it to believe it.
John, stand by. John, I'm looking at the book by Sir Henry Winnicky, the Governor of Victoria. He's the #1 ticket holder at Hawthorn, as you know. John, page 83, don't think, do. Emphasise do. Hit it hard. Good, very good, John. Hit it hard. Good. Act. Just act. No, act. That's better. On the ball. Good, very good, John. Very good.
So that's Jimmy Defanti.
I believe that's the voice of Jimmy Defanti.
So this bloke Defanti is effectively feeding John Kennedy his speech. How?
I don't know. You'd have to look at the technology of the day.
Regardless, I mean, it's amazing. It's astounding to think that someone is telling John Kennedy what to say, but this is the proof.
This is the proof.
Amazing.
Even more amazing was when we synchronised the Defanti dictabelt to the Kennedy voice recording. Have a look at this.
John, stand by.
All right, down, you bloke!
John, I'm looking at the book by Sir Henry Winnicky, the Governor of Victoria. He's the #1 ticket holder at Hawthorn, as you know.
Down, Tucky!
John, page 83, don't think, do. Emphasise do. Hit it hard.
And even the Governor, Sir Henry Winnicky,
Good, very good, John. Hit it hard.
he has often said, at least do something! Do! Don't think, Mick! Don't hope! Do! At least you can come off and say, I did this! Or I shepherded! Or I played on! At least I did something for the sake of the side.
Good. Act. Just act.
Do!
No, act.
Act!
That's better.
Don't think, act! Eye on the ball!
On the ball. Good, very good, John. Very good.
It was time to pay a more formal visit to my old mate. Sure, he gave me the recordings, but what was John Kennedy hiding?
Jimmy Defanti. They called him the Wordsmith.
Oh, yes. Great wordsmith, as you say, and he seemed to know all the orators of all time, and Churchill wasn't beyond him, and he knew about we shall never surrender. And Jimmy could do all that kind of thing and think of the right word at the right time.
Winston Churchill, of course, and of course his love of JFK.
Ask not what you can do for you, what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And he...
The other John Kennedy.
Yes, he was up to all of that commentary, and he certainly was an inspiration when it came to just a few well-chosen words to sum up the situation at the time.
And John, would it be fair to say that your success as a coach, not all of it, but the majority, is due to one Jimmy Defanti?
Oh, yes, I think that's fair enough. I suppose any club, there's a group of people who all regard their own role as important, but there'd be general consensus that Jimmy was, stood out as well above the ordinary contributor.
Would you call him a genius?
Yes, extraordinary talent. and he really is. He's got a touch of the wizard about him.
John, going back to your success as a coach, can I ask, do you feel any guilt, if I can use that word? Do you feel any remorse that you never actually acknowledged the contribution that Jimmy Defanti made to your success? Any remorse, John? Any guilt? Ashamed? That you kept this a secret for all these years? You took credit for Jimmy's work. Jimmy, your friend, Jimmy Defanti. You ashamed of yourself, John? Fair enough, old mate. Let's move on. 1975. We're moving on. 1975, and John, I've listened to the recordings that you gave me. They've been analysed. It was 1975, and it was just 3 simple words that Jimmy Defanti wrote for you. Don't, think, do.
Yes, I understand that, and well, that's great to hear. Hear you confirm that, because certainly I tried to learn from Jim and address players in the appropriate way, which I tried to do in 75, but Ron's team won.
Ron Barassi.
Had nothing to do with Ron's coaching or anything like that. It was mainly Jimmy's inspiration through Ron to the players, I'm sure of that.
So Jimmy, he didn't write exclusively for you?
Far from it, and he wrote for more famous, very famous people, and...
well, like who?
Just good to have the same name as John Kennedy of the United States, and I understand Jimmy wrote for him too.
Oh, come on, mate, don't muck round. You, Barassi, who else? What other famous people did he write for? John Kennedy had clearly said too much. Coming up next, Molly Meldrum faces the music.
Oh, wouldn't you know this would fucking happen?
It's all coming up next. If Jimmy Defanti wrote for more famous people, then it didn't get much more famous than this. It was 1964, and the Beatles had just touched down in Melbourne. For an aspiring songwriter named Jimmy Defanti, he found himself right in the eye of the storm.
Well, Ringo Starr famously had fallen ill while the band was touring through Japan. They were on their way to Melbourne, and bottom line is, the Beatles needed a new drummer.
It was time for a quick chat with my old bandmate from the 80s, my former bass player turned Triple M music guru, Lee Simon.
Well, the truth is, Jimmy wasn't really well liked or respected in the music industry. He was a bit of a smarty. He always rated himself better than he was, constantly bragging about all the contacts he had around the world, in America in particular. Bit of a tough guy. The reality is he wasn't a patch on so many other contemporary musicians like our own Vander and Young, for example.
Good bloke.
He did play on the demo of the Easy Beats Wedding Ring, the demo version, because Snowy Fleet had been in a bit of a brawl and broken his thumb. Smart thing for a drummer to do. But Jimmy didn't actually play on the final release of Wedding Ring. He was only on the demo.
So how did he end up playing with the Beatles?
Well, Jimmy used to hang around with Billy Hyde a whole lot. Billy Hyde knew Brian Epstein. Epstein had asked Billy Hyde if he wanted to play in the band. But Billy actually had been having an affair at the time with the artist Joy Hester.
Wow.
So Jimmy's name came up for those 2 nights.
So the old Jimmy Jim Jimster replacing Ringo Starr for 2 nights.
Yeah, 2 nights at Festival Hall.
2 nights at Festival Hall.
2 nights.
2 nights. And there he was, Vincenzo Medici Defanti, Jimmy to his mates. And for a brief 48 hours, he was, amazingly, one of the Fab Four. But if Jimmy Defanti was just a fan who made it, he wasn't the biggest Beatles fan of them all. That honour fell to a young kid from Orbost, East Gippsland, a kid known simply as Molly. Ian Molly Meldrum is something of an icon when it comes to us here in Australia. Molly loved the Beatles, obviously. He also discovered Swedish pop sensation ABBA, put his magic touch on a young nightclub singer by the name of Madonna. He also produced hits for Peter Andre, Jo Beth Taylor and Indecent Obsession, amongst other legends, or to name but a few. But Molly's true contribution to world history has remained a secret, known only to a few select few. What's next?
Now, I play music, a lot of music. I'm no rock star, not yet, but I'm here at the home of Molly Meldrum, and the Molster and I have something else in common besides our love of good old-fashioned rock and roll. We're tragics when it comes to a little-known football club known as the St Kilda Football Club. We like to call them the Saints. And here it is, the 1966 Premiership Cup, and a photo that holds a lot of secrets. Molly, welcome. We're going to talk about yours and my favourite subject, St Kilda's mighty premiership win back in 1966. But we're also going to talk about one Jimmy Defanti. Ready to rock?
Yeah, good old Jimmy. Actually, I've known Jimmy for a long, long while. He used to come to a couple of the St Kilda matches. He didn't for St Kilda, but I was in the cheer squad, and so he'd help me out there. And he also inspired me one day. We were playing in the last of the home and home matches, and we had to win by a fair bit against our opposition that day to get into the finals because of the percentages, etc., etc.
Well, Jimmy, unfortunately, was Molly's best mate, and that's how Jimmy got into the team and into the club.
Jimmy met Molly through his work with the Beatles, and when the Beatles came out in 1964, and then it was Molly that brought Jimmy down to St Kilda. So you can say it was Molly that started the whole thing.
During that time, I introduced Jimmy to, because he wrote a lot of scripts, and I introduced him to our coach, Alan Jeans, and so Alan used him and used some of his thoughts and somehow what we would say in speeches, and I think, OK, Jimmy, I'll put that in.
He arrived at the club early in the season, and Jeansy was always a great orator, but Jimmy just made him outstanding, and some of the lines that Yab delivered during the course of the year were pure Jimmy, and really inspired us to make the finals and eventually the grand final.
A grand final for St Kilda? Way back in '66, it was a case of dare to dream. Or was it? With Alan Jeans now steering the ship, it appeared that almost anything was possible. Jeansy, also known as Yabby, was a high-ranking senior sergeant with Australia's Victorian Police. A tough-as-nails copper who spent his early years on the force by playing 77 games for the Saints. Nicknamed Jeansy, Yabby took the reins of St Kilda in 1961, embarking on a remarkable 16-year career as senior coach. But a Premiership Cup seemed tantalisingly out of reach, until Molly introduced Yabby to Jimmy. He also loved lawn bowls.
They were a team, Jeans, Meldrum and Defanti. Jimmy and Jeans would write the words, and Molly would run the words onto the ground, deliver them to the players.
Molly was the leader of the cheer squad, and Jimmy was with him at the grand final. And Jimmy was giving Molly messages during the course of the game. Molly would come bounding out with his big hat delivering messages illegally. You couldn't even do it in those days.
Jimmy continued to work with Jeansy, and I'm sure that Jeansy contributed some of Jimmy's wisdom to what he said to the players at three-quarter time and what he said after. So Jeansy was very happy.
But that obviously wasn't enough.
We weren't doing enough. And so Jimmy whispered me here and said something. And so we kicked a goal, but that wasn't enough. And he told me what to do. And so I blithely jumped over the fence and raced out into the middle of the ground, and the umpire was about to bounce the ball. And I went, hey, stop. And I said, I need to speak to the players.
What Jimmy told Molly to say that day, Molly doesn't remember. But St Kilda's point-kicking legend Barry Breen certainly does.
Well, there's a line that Jeansy used in the grand final at three-quarter time. The scores were pretty much level. It was nip and tuck all day. And Jeansy said to the group, you've got 25 minutes to make a name for yourself. And he did it a lot sort of louder than that.
25 minutes to make a name for yourself like you never made before.
And that was pure Jimmy.
And that was Jimmy's line.
That was Jimmy's line. Now, if Yabby hadn't used that line at three-quarter time, there's no doubt I wouldn't have kicked the point that won the game.
The ball, he's caught. A chance for Green. Green pops for goal. And it's bounced through for the point.
So what you're saying, on the record, for the first time is that Jimmy Defanti effectively won the 1966 grand final for St Kilda.
We wouldn't have won the flag without Jimmy, there's no doubt about that.
Barry Breen had clearly said too much.
Kicks the ball in. Howell is there. A chance.
My old mate, the Maltster, continued to describe the drama that unfolded on that fateful day.
Going back to sit with Jimmy and all of them, unfortunately I was basically arrested and taken out of the ground, basically.
But Molly wasn't the only one arrested that day. Later that night, during the celebrations, Jimmy Defanti was also taken into custody, charged with interfering with the outcome of a sporting match.
Obviously, the police got him, put him in jail, and with Yab being a policeman and Molly in jail as well, and with Molly's connection and Yab's connection with the police force, the situation became untenable and Jimmy had to leave.
This was starting to get interesting. Coming up next, the glory days at St Kilda.
People think we're complete and utter losers.
It's all coming up next. 1966 should have been the dawn of a golden age for St Kilda. But Jimmy Defanti's arrest has turned the home of this once proud football club into something resembling downtown Beirut. Russell Holmesby explains.
It was a tragedy, really, when you think that if Defanti had stayed, we'd still be winning flags to this day, instead of what we've become. People think we're complete and utter losers.
Useless.
Just one flag. Even when we're winning by 10 goals, someone will yell out, "How many flags have you won?" Just one bloody flag.
Tragic.
And the irony is that on the night of our greatest triumph, the seeds of destruction were planted by Jimmy Defanti's arrest. I mean, it's all there in the photo, if anyone cares to look.
The famous 66 photo.
That's Darryl Baldock. That's Alan Jeans, also known as Yabby.
Yabby? Yep.
So you've got Baldock, Jeansy, and who's that hand over in the corner? That's Jimmy.
And there it was, a clue that had been under the nose of this reporter from the very beginning of this report. Defanti in the flesh.
That's Jimmy Defanti.
That's Jimmy Defanti.
Probably trying to tell Jeansy, don't let the cops take me away.
But they ignored him.
But Jeansy ignored him. He's probably celebrating too much.
Probably having a great time.
And look at St Kilda now. Still stuck on one bloody flag.
Shit Kilda.
And if Jimmy Defanti had stayed, it could have been so much more.
Man up, Russ.
They say that destiny can take on many forms, and when you look into the future, it's a little bit like tomorrow, a tomorrow that never comes. For St Kilda Football Club, without the services of Jimmy Defanti, that tomorrow never came. No more premierships, no more flags, no more glory. But what about the Wordsmith? As we look into his future, we're about to discover that for Jimmy Defanti, the best is yet to come. Next time on Sandy Roberts Presents.
We've all kept this under the radar for a long, long time. I mean, silence is golden sometimes.
Silence is golden. I often say that.
Then they signed that contract, a 10-year contract. He was only going to write for two coaches, his love child, Tommy Hafey, and his brother Barassi.
This is Jimmy Defanti's actual notebook. I killed a bloke for this.
Well, we don't know that.
No, I really did. We filmed it.
How do you top that when a bloke has had such an influence on the game, and particularly at that level, and you bring two clubs together and they actually draw?
I took a little bit from Jimmy, only a bit.
But you were the one who clapped the opposition players onto the ground.
Yep.
And then you made your players wrap their heads in filthy bath towels and address you as Big Chief Malcolm. After which you passed around a so-called peace pipe, which was in fact just a stick. Malcolm, what on earth were you thinking?
Madness.
And fair enough.
I won't be silenced. That's all coming up in 2016.
Jimmy also helped me because I'd started in television, to speak properly on television. And Jimmy, I've got to show you this, because this is actually a replica of exactly how the MCG scoreboard looked on that amazing, amazing day in 1966. And look, probably through you, St Kilda won by a point. And Collingwood couldn't get it back.
This has been a Babs Caltrain production of a Fox Sports presentation of a Fox Footy special presentation.
Good night, Yabby.
This program is brought to you by the limited edition Lamborghini Lo Stolto Sandy Roberts Limited Edition, driven exclusively by Sandy Roberts.
I use it to get the facts.